Mm.
where all global trends are now localized. All global economic development are now localized, which was anticipated in this article, by the way.
Mm.
So they know and understand already that what happening globally is also happening locally, and it's good also that this article is citing the local context. So, that's why again it's called theory, because again it suited fit to the local context.
Mm.
And in the introduction to economic development, there are also crucial role of the organization mentions, no? Mga, they call it economic players, no? Although
Mm.
we don't have some of the players because we don't have a federal government, but
Mm.
this is also, although it also assigned, right, of this article, na it's gearing, like the bias of the article, it's somehow government led, no? That's how
Mm.
the article is approached, because this was written 10 years or 10 years ago, no? So
Yeah,
currently right now it's
2006.
yeah, currently right now it's really more on, especially the Philippines, we're leaning towards privatization, PPPs,
Mm.
private leading the way in terms of economic development, direction setting. So it's more than that. Then the government is just the somehow the
Support.
kung sa bangka pa siya lang yung ano, support, no? Supporter siya. Kung sa sagwan yung government is the one at the back, no? Making sure that everything is okay. But the one
Mm.
leading is the one in front, which is now the private sector. And that is the trend that we see right now locally and even nationally. So one of the bias that I see, because this was written in 2006, it's really local government led. Public
Mm.
policies, if you look at the second report, they talk about policy development, policy improvement. But the direction right now is changing from being a group government led towards a private led institution that makes major developments here in Cebu. In fact, most of our major projects here in Cebu are private led.
Mm.
SRP are private led. CSLEX are privately led. The second bridge is loaned by JICA, which is also privately led. Most of our major establishment, MEPSA or Mactan became Mactan right now because of our Mactan Economic Zone, which is also privately led. So
Mm.
that it now changes from being government led to privately led. But that's where my political dimension would come in. If this is privately led, what would be the government's role on this? No, in the economic perspective, we call it the invisible hand. Let the invisible hand work. But for
Mm.
the government led, there must be regulation. Regulation must be set up because we're protecting the social welfare. Meaning, hindi na, it's not possible that just the government who, it's just a private sector who dictates everything, because that will impact consumers, that will impact constituents. That's why, if I connect it to the second article, it talks about output and outcome, where the
Mm.
government looks at the output. How can this immediately impact my constituents? But for a private sector or the economic development, it's more on the outcome. How
Mm.
can, because again, if you look at the economic development, it's all about, basically, it's all about return of investment, making money, and uh, the speed of rotating the evolving of money must be there. So
Mm.
that's now the it's not they're not complementing. Sometimes they're not, they're even conflicting,
Mm.
because the government always looks at the constituents welfare, while
Mm.
the private sector, if that is privately led, they look at the employees welfare. But basically, the first things first is, are we getting
Profit.
our ROI as early
Mm.
as possible? And right now, since everything is very fast, everything is speed, they look at ROI as early as 2 to 3 years, before 6 years, 8 years. But right now, they're looking at ROI to 2 to 3 years. That's why some of the businesses are coming here, as some businesses are going out, because they see the Philippines, either it's so slow or so fast. But the competition right now is really globalization. Why? Because it's not just between local governments to local governments. Institutions right now are also looking at countries to countries. Is Indonesia worth investing? Is the Philippines worth investing? What is their government regulation? Is China worth investing? And that's very easy right now. Very easy to decide. That's why
Mm.
globalization is the trend because investors are looking at countries who can they make profit most of. They call it ease of doing business.
Mm.
So that's why for me, no, that's now my how I look at currently right now, where maybe it was not discussed by this article because it's more on the introductory part and it's more
Yeah.
on government centric. How can the government develop economic, no? How can the government develop the economy within this area? It's more on government led, but right now, based on my understanding and even readings right now, it's really private sector leading and just the government saying, "Oh, you can go there. Okay, I'll support you wherever you are." It's more on that. But I understand why the article is that. It's
Mm.
because it's 2006.
Yeah, more good. It's a bit old. Unfortunately, what I bago. I need to do some digging. Um, anyone else? Let's see. Okay, who else read the first chapter? Maria?
Wala pa na ako siya nabasa, sir. But based on today's market man good is dominated by business elites. So,
Mm.
somehow, sila ang gabuhi sa market. Sila pod ang hatag og mostly gahatag og tax para sa government.
Mm.
So, somehow they control the government kay namang gyud bias-bias.
Yeah,
And
they have the money. They have
oo,
buy runs.
because sila mo'y dako nga gahatag o gapadagan sa economy, the government's policies are somehow lenient or ang mga tax dili gyud kaayo dako ang gi charge bitaw sa ilaha.
Mm.
So towards bali sila mo'y gadikta gyud.
Mm. Okay. Queen Lee, do you have any comments? It doesn't have to be based on the article, but is this happening in your area as well? Privatization, uh, governments favoring specific companies, is that happening?
Um, I cannot say it's favoring, sir, but it's more of a welcoming kay since Tanhay Manggod, sir, no, slow kay ang progress, although city siya, but more on agricultural. So right
Mm.
now, the new administration is aiming towards kanang progressive siya, livable Tanhay in the sense na makakita pud mi og tag-as na building, sir. Kay right now, I think we only have 3 floors nga pinakataas namo na building pero
So,
dili
wala
jud ka
agad.
kaingon. Yeah,
Mm.
but dili jud ka kaingon nga ano, I don't know if you have been to Dumaguete, sir, pero lahi ra gyud kayo ang Tanhay sa Dumaguete.
Mm.
We are ano manggod ka ng more on agricultural. So right now we have developers coming in. So mura siya gingon ana, sir, like they are
Mm.
the ones directing kung asa ang favorable site nila, and the government comes in to give support like yeah, we can provide drainage systems, dalan over padulong diha. In the sense pud also, sir, nga dili man pud ko kaingon nga favored good sila because sa akong experience, sir, they are complying man pod. They are
Mm.
complying, although dili gud mawala ng naimanawag sa imuhang politiko, sir, ba to expedite the process.
Yeah,
But
naagid na.
in fairness to the developers, sir, they are complying with the requirement. Mao lang po na, sir.
Mm. No one's asking
And
for exceptions.
yes, but also, sir, ano, yeah, I can really attest, sir, no, sa giingon ni Natalie na gamay ra kayo ang tax. Mao lang na akong nakita gid, sir, gamay gid siya kaayo. Like
Mm.
we charge 5 pesos per square meter, and then given na 2023 na karon, murag gamay ra jud siya kaayo.
Bitaw no, murag panahon pa ng Marcos na tax. The first Marcos. Nelson, you had a very kanang illustrious kanang background sa inyong work. What can you say about kaning economic development? Do you agree na that is what's happening, or do you see this among work?
I think for in case from my kuan sa akong background lang sir ha, kay if ever ko namin mga project condominium subdivisions usually uh we the LGU and the the real estate developer, we use ang ilahang gina-focus jud is to balance the between the effect or the impact of the kuan sir, the especially the condos and the real estate, since it's these projects focusing more on kuan man sad, di ba sir, kanang to earn
Mm.
economy, di ba?
Mm.
In a sense that this project could help the economic growth. And then as I say sir, just kuan lang gid kanang try to balance between the economy and to those neighboring kanang mga tao nga na affect to that project. I think that's it.
Okay. Ako mo share.
Balance the economy.
Na yung mga comments eh. Yeah, if development is fast privately, maybe the guard needs to cope up revisiting some more like institutionals, TIA, and kiba ko sa environmental impact assessment. Unsay TIA, Sir Elling?
Traffic impact assessment.
Okay, traffic.
Traffic impact assessment.
On my end, I can give some highlight here sa Australia. So one of the bigger projects karon is the I'll go to Australia. That I experienced was the Sydney Light. Let's go to Sydney. They're really focused on transportation and mobility. So for example, here in Sydney, nakita gyud na ko na siya ang construction sa ilahang light rail na renovation. So you see here, this is George Street in Sydney, mo nilang City Hall. And you see the commercial buildings there, mo nilang Woolworths, the Australian version of Walmart. And then you have like commercial building here. These are apartments or hotels, I think. These are bookstores, kananan, supermarket, train station ni siya. So in 2015, this was still kanang car na basically vehicle na lane. But they started a project around 2019 na na-transform na siya into light rail. So you see the railway here. And then wala na cars, it's all kanang a light rail is basically a train. You can see sections na mo shift siya in and out 2015 and then 2020. Ang kalahi niya is the rail is kind of embedded sa ground, and then this is a form of mass transportation. So with the light rail, they could move more people faster and cheaper. And sa akong na-experience, I'm trying to find out who funded this project, but I think it's also similar to what Sir Ellie said, na it's kanang privately led. I think a corporation, amo ni siya. Ang owner is Transport for NS New South Wales, which I think is a government na body, but who initiated this project? This is public-private siya na partnership. So very likely a private company came up with the idea, or somebody else came up with the idea and a private company backed it, and that's why it's existing here today. Otherwise, if it was government-led, I think they would have just stuck with the original kanang cars lang. I think for the most part, based on my experience, it's also the same thing here in Sydney. And then again, not so much na with regards to like theories of where businesses locate. Here in the heart of Sydney, this is really where all the big offices are. And it seems like no matter what they do, it's really hard for these businesses to go out. That's why all the people like in a, let's say, I think here, all the way up here, go to here. So these are the kind of residential areas here where you see Kellyville, Rouse Hill. They travel almost 25 to 30 kilometers all to work here in the city center. And because housing is so kanang expensive, or like apartments, condominiums are so expensive in the city, they're forced to live further and further away, which is kind of like an impact of a result, or not really a result, but a cause of urban sprawl. And I think we're also seeing that in Cebu today. So, and again, I promised to show you some slides here. Let's see. Close. I think I have it here. Urban planning history. Okay. With regards to Cebu, based on the information that I have, this is studies from older professors and architects in the University of San Carlos. They basically documented the development of Cebu from the 1600s. So you can see here, 1600s, Cebu started in their heritage district, what is currently the heritage district, sa Colon. And then eventually it spread out like this. In the 1910s, we also had a railway. And then this was just at the around the time the car was also invented. So you have these streets and roads that go all the way up into the kanang mountainous areas. Not really all the way up. This is still fairly flat here. This is the capital area. And then the impact of that was sort of more businesses along the major sort of roads. And then because technology was an issue back then, they couldn't build tall buildings. So they had to it was cheaper to build on new land than on existing buildings. So development spread out, similar to what was happening in Sydney. And then if you see here a map of 1940 Cebu, where the left side here, you see a lot of agricultural land. And then eventually it was all redeveloped into our subdivisions today. And sort of going back to that economic development, this is basically how the result of that economic development. So policies favored basically, I guess from the 90s all the way to the 2000s, they favored, what do you call this? Maybe they were government-led, siguro, during the 70s, but agree ko ni Sir Elina today and then in the past 20 years, it's been privately led because all of these subdivisions, they are privately owned. And then basically the tax base has increased because you have more residents, and then they still work here in, let's see, in the Fuente area, the Ayala area, and the IT Park area. So the new subdivisions help support the new businesses. Yeah, IT Park is somewhere around here, and and then the residents are the ones working in those BPOs. So I see some of those theories working, and then what do you call this? As we go through the other document here, what is economic development, what are policies, who is in charge. So we can see some of this working as well, but for the most part, I feel like economic development, as mentioned here in early part of the article, is very much defined by one's perspective. We're such a huge problem now. We really need to take it apart, and just defining what economic development is our first step. So I think I'll end it here at 5:15. I'll finish this. There are some really interesting ideas here where they divided the idea or the approach of defining economic development into two. So that's the political science approach and then the economist approach or the economics approach. So political science is concerned with the outputs, the policies, the kanang regulation that dictates what will happen. And in the succeeding paragraphs here, it talks about how it's true that the policies do impact the outcomes. And then the economics approach just focus on the outcome first. So before they say, before a new policy is created, they focus on existing policies to see if they actually do what they're intended to do. And then I just skip to the conclusion here. Now, this article suggests that we should be more urban planners like us should be more focused on the outcomes, because we are, what do you call this? Because according to this article, that is where the value is. Like if the policy actually works, and then we analyze that and then try to replicate it. these other stuff na wala pa nun abtan, I'll review it with you guys next week. And then the other reading for next week is also available online. That is over here. 02, meaning kanang week 2, business location, expansion, and retention. And hopefully that will give us some insight on like how do we kanang regulate where businesses go. And then, for example, in places like Tanhai, you want more businesses to go there. So maybe you'll get some ideas on how to like make that happen. Meanwhile, I think in Cebu, do you think, Sir Eli, do you think there's like too many businesses in Cebu? Or should we regulate businesses in Cebu? Like, based on your experience lang. I think also Nelson is Cebu based.
Yeah, actually, what is happening right now in Cebu is okay, no? But again, looking at on a livability perspective, growth must be planned. Right? That's why CLUP must be updated, CDP must be updated, because again, growth must be planned, because there are factors beyond the government's control that is happening now and will becoming worse later. I'm talking about climate change. I'm talking about the impact of COVID-19, which was unexpected. I'm talking about future disaster risk and calamities,
Recessions
that will happen. So growth is good, but it must be planned. That's why CLUP is very crucial to every LGU, because it dictates growth. It dictates growth areas. It dictates movement of people. That's why LPTRP is also important. It dictates what are areas not for residents or not. That's why your zoning is important, and also your how do you call it, DRRMCC cap plan is very important, because plans must be there to dictate growth, and growth must follow based on the plan. But what's happening to Cebu right now, we call it variance, no? But on the private sector, we call it variance.
variants.
A lot of variance, which is a sign that growth is
Unplanned.
and we call it,
It's paid for.
how do you call it if it's unplanned growth? There was a
Urban
term for
sprawl.
urban sprawl. And urban sprawl kills people, and that's reality. It kills people. I mean, kills people literally. It really kills people. So that's my take for Cebu, and not just for Cebu, but even for Tanhay and other local government units in the Philippines. Growth must be planned and must be dictated by that particular plan, because again, we have limited resources, we have a limited physical space, and our people is growing and it's getting younger. So with that, maybe let's make use of the social space. Let's make use of the creative industry, because we don't need a lot of space for creatives, right? We don't need a lot of space for programmers, no? And it, from being BPO, business processing outsourcing, we become now KPO, knowledge process outsourcing, where investors comes into Cebu not because we're good in English, but they come here to Cebu because we have the talent, we have the skills, we have the even though we don't speak English that well, but because you have the skill of a good programmer, then I'll hire you, right? So that must be the evolution ba. That's why I put here in the chat group, if the private sector is moving fast, dictating growth so fast, the local government, the national, both local and national, even provincial, must also be fast. No? Look at development trends and where can we go, and start with updating the CLUP. Importante kayo. That's it for me.
Very good. Nelson, you're also Cebu based?
Yes, sir. As I can see, sir, kanang all about kanang economy and the growth of our development here in Cebu. I think I learned something sa ko ang subject before nga dapat ang plano unta is 50 years nga plan, di ba? Dapat ahead, so that then all I can see, manggod sir, sa Cebu karon, I think they never anticipated that kanang 50 years of plan, which is kanang usa na po na ka-example is that kanang widening of road. So which is greatly kining kuan ni Sir Elizar kining institutionalized traffic impact, which is supposed to be lisod na siya karon panahon nga i-widening bitaw staircase since there's a lot of structure na, which is can cause kanang sa tawagan ay socio problems like informal settlers. And then more na akong nakita sir, which is sakto gid siya, nindot siya ang growth, but the problem was wala nato na anticipate katong 50 years plan. I think makakuan ni nakita ni nako ang plano dito sa as you discussed last week sir sa Iloilo, which is good na kay giplano gid nila ang ilahang ilang infrastructure dito, which is good because knowing the fact that Iloilo will going to kanang ni kuan na siya ba ni level up ng ilahang development and economy, which is gi-consider nila ang kanang plan ahead. Maura na siya akong nakita sa Cebu. That's why there's a lot of problem siguro economic kining nasa ko nakita nga green belt, di ba sa Cebu sir na may green belt nga which is dili na dapat dito may exceed, di ba kay tungod sa urban sprawl, I think, which is good pod. Pero I don't know what would happen in the future since wa mo ko nakita pod 50 years. I think one of the kuan lang siguro pod nga recommend is the kani bitong implementation of green building. I don't think so kay ana man gud sila nga ang green building daw is could kuan siya og corruptions. Corruptions, di ba sir? Makakuha siya corruption. May ta kanang naa sila mga steps bitaw nga kana bitong maka-open sila ng green building which is dili siya maka-cause og nay mga ordinances na nay mga methods or any steps nga kanang dili green building nga ma-apply na to sa tukang city nga which kanang wala na ang kanabitong corruptions nga I think nagpatigbabaw na nga tong mga sa
apil na sa mga kanang fees nimo.
Nanay kuan sir ba nanay level of kanang I think steps sa kanang LGUs or something mga national or something just like in Singapore nga kang Singapore karon nindot na kayo because they plan 50 years. Then I think it's hard pud kay di ba ang Singapore it takes them 50 years to be able to progress. So I think kana ra gyud akong makuan sir ma-recommend or I think nakita po nako sa Cebu City. That's it sir. Thank you.
Sige, good. Quinley, asa gani ka na base?
Tanhay sir, Negros Oriental.
Okay. Maria, you're in
Tanhay po sir.
kamo duha Tanhay. So what do you think? Kita na mo you see the problems or the opportunities and problems and there is a Cebu. What do you think? What do you want to happen sa Tanhay? So obviously you want to regulate it, but like what do you call this? What are your opinions on it? Kanang economic development in your area? Una lang ta with Quinley.
Sir, actually sir, ang ano gud nila sir no, thrust nila is going to kanang at least man lang mo step up mi sa amo ang economy sir and economic activities. We are trying to update the CLUP and insakto tong giingon ni Sir Nelson, ang among CLUP pod sir sa akong makita is conservative ra kaayo ba? I mean, ang pag-envision niya how Tanhay will become or iyahang mga 20, 30 years from now, ano ra gid kay sir, conservative gyud kaayo ang iyahang murabag ang scope niya is very limited and murabag wala niya na explore ang possibility Tanhay could be like that kay isa man pud na sa lantawon sa investor once they will ask for the zoning map makita gud nimo dito sir nga mostly agricultural so they have ano gyud kanang maghuna-huna sila if feasible ba ang ilahang itukod nga development since maghuna-huna pa sila conversion, reclassification, daghan pa kay lang agian whereas if na ano na ta to siya nga a bigger area for commercial in ana sir ang amo rangong gisaligan sir for kuan karon sir is kanang built up areas or mixed up use within national highway so with that maka ano gumis among mga katong coming developers nga yes ano gud siya feasible sila for your commercial use. And also sir I think the biggest factor is also kanang political will sir kay ano man gud siya sir kanang Naamagoy mga instances nga they wanted it to happen, but with in terms to the regulations, the ordinances, sir, lisod kayo sa ilahang i-push labi na like kanang maulagi na sir, ganahan sila mo entice pero at the same time dili pud sila ganahang mupataas sa ilahang sa tax mangin ana sir. So
Magyud.
political will gud ang one factor ani sir.
Maya niya kog copy sa inyong CLUP ha, matanaw po na.
Okay gud kaayo sir kay karon sir ganahan gud mi nga maano gud namo ang CLUP. Actually sir, we only have one copy and kuan gud siya sir. Hardbound ra gud siya na
Wait,
mano-mano ra
digital?
ang pag-drawing. Wala sir.
Okay. Maybe we can learn something pod na will help you digitize that. And then finally, Maria, we okay, just for the last 2 minutes, your thoughts on is development good? Can there be too much economic development?
Kuan sir, maayo ang development but marag need i-update ang land use map para sa future expansions and para matarong ang allocation and ma-utilize ang mga resources nga present and mga ang labor and services pod dayon para pod walay mahitabo nga conversion of agri to commercial or residential spaces kay ang tana is dako ang agricultural land so para pod abot ta sa murag tulid tanhay to self-sufficiency sa iyang agricultural products nga ma-offer.
Okay, I think that's very good. I will upload this recording as well so you can review it. But